Backstage with Mothership on Solid Rock Radio begins now. Hear the best in new music, artist interviews, stories from the road, and more. You are now backstage, and here's your host, Mothership.
Hey, everybody. My guests today are Eddie, Gary, and Chris of the band Fear Not. Fear Not was formed in the 80s from the LA rock and metal scene, and they are back. Chris is going to join us a little later. Let's get started by finding out who is in the lineup now and what everybody does.
So Eddie Green, lead vocal, Larry Worley, backing vocal and co-lead and rhythm guitar, Chris Sorensen, backing vocal, co-lead and rhythm guitar, Rod Romero, backing vocal and bass, and Gary Hansen, drums and backing vocals.
How did Fear Not come to be, and who started it?
I'm the only OG here.
Okay.
I guess I'll tell it in late 80s, probably about 87, 88. Larry and myself, actually, we were in a band called Love Life. That was our first actual signed band. But prior to that, I was playing with Mike Link, who ended up being in a band called Mad at the World. Another gentleman named Darren Evie, and we were writing songs in Darren's garage. He was a bass player, guitar, and drums. And we realized that none of us could be the lead singer. So we put an ad out in the recycler, and probably don't remember the recycler. It was a California, like an advertising, kind of like a Craigslist type thing. We put an ad out, and Larry showed up, and we've been thanking God ever since. He showed up with songs ready to go. He was just amazing talent right from the beginning. We did a few shows as that iteration. We were called Reaction. Then we changed the name to Forever. And then Mike left and joined another band. And so we were looking for bass players. I was going to Calvary Chapel, West Covina, but that was before Sanctuary. Striper was there, and this band called Surrender was there, and they were really good friends. There was about 4 or 5 bands that all went there. Eternal Right, and anyway, Darren and I were roadieing in for a band called Surrender. Their bass player had a roadie, and his name was Rod Romero, and Rod became our bass player. That's where we met him. So it was Larry, Rod, me, and Darren, and did a lot of shows in Hollywood, a lot of shows in the Inland Empire, a lot of shows, locally in California. We did everything from boys' homes, prisons, to, right on the Sunset Strip, along with, all the big bands back then. Darren left the band, and Larry had met Chris. Right about then was NAMM show time. We met up with him at the NAMM show. Larry played him a cassette demo of the new stuff we were working on. He was like, yeah, okay. And so Chris joined the band, and that's kind of how we got started. And then on and off, the 4 of us have been together since then. And we did the first record with Darren, and then the Love Life record. We did the Pachyderm deal with Chris. We did that as Fear Not. In between that, we had a stint where Larry decided he wanted to be the lead singer. A friend of ours, Michael Cutting, who was in a band called Holy Soldier, he was in the band, and we actually were called Fear No Evil. But Michael ended up going back into Holy Soldier, and so we thought, what are we going to do? So that's when we changed it to Fear Not. And that's kind of how it happened. Then we got signed with Pachyderm, and so they say that the rest is history.
Pachyderm Records, that's the Elefante brothers, correct?
Yes, we were the Elefante brothers. Yes.
Wow.
Fast forward 25 years, and we had some really good friends that came together, and they found out Larry lived in Oklahoma. So they put together a whole weekend and flew us out to Oklahoma City, put us up in a hotel, set up their whole gymnasium, and the 4 of us attempted to play all the old songs, and it was like riding a bike. It was really good. But at that point, Larry had made the decision that we need to find a singer because he didn't sing a lot. His voice kind of went away, and a few other medical things. But we had a couple songs written already and fed them to Eddie, and Eddie just killed them. He recorded them, and they just sounded great. And we invited him to join the band, and reluctantly, kicking and screaming, he said yes.
Your turn, Eddie.
I was in a Christian hardcore metalcore band, and that's how Larry and I met. He rides with a motorcycle ministry called the Priesthood. They asked us to play one of their rallies, so I hung around, those guys and got to know Larry through that chapter. Then my band played an event for them. And then after about 10 years, we had signed with a sub label of Warner Brothers, and, we were out playing really more in the secular scene, playing with bands like Slipknot, Five Finger Death Punch, Killswitch Engage, Slayer, all these guys.
Yeah.
And just after about 10 years, we just decided, it's run its course. And I'd laid music down, and had been out of it for a couple of years, and just got a phone call one day from Larry. And I hadn't hung around the motorcycle group. I hadn't talked to him in probably like 2 years. And he said, hey, he goes, you still doing music? And I said, well, I'll always be doing music at, some capacity. I said, but I'm not in a band anymore. I said, I've kind of laid that down. And he said, well, I wanted to know if you might want to come over and record a Fear Not song. And I said, why aren't you recording it? He's like, I'm like, you're the lead singer. And he's like, well, I just can't do it anymore. And he said, and I've been praying about it, and we want to get back together. And I believe God's called us to bring in a new front man, and we want to see what you think. So I went over and re-recorded a song called Love Is All Right. And he sent it to the guys, and I had never met them. I'd only met Larry. And he said, the guys really liked it. They're all going to fly in. We'd like to record an EP. Do you want to come do the vocals on it? And I was like, sure. So I introduced him to our producer, who we use now, because he produced all of our stuff with Even the Dogs. And they fell in love with him, and Kyle just embraced the vision of what we were trying to do. And Gary was cutting the drum tracks for Don't Want None. And I had heard none of this music at all. I was running late that day. Walk into the studio, he's cutting the drums, and I'm listening to the guitar parts, and everything was laid down. And I'm like, as soon as Gary hit his last beat, I'm like, set the vocal mic up now. I'm writing the whole time he's doing them. And I literally penned the entire song while he was cutting his drum tracks. Walked in there and laid down the gist of it. And it was just instant chemistry with the guys, like I'd been there my whole life. Like we had grown up and played together. And, it's just the chemistry we have when we write is uncanny. It's something you don't see in most bands. And then we just continue to evolve. Fields of Sorrow came out. It was complete 180 degrees from what their initial album was. And this new stuff is even more modern than Fields of Sorrow.
What are the top 3 albums that formed your music taste? Let's start with you, Gary.
Well, for me, it started with the Beatles. My dad, when I was born, my dad owned a record store in downtown Pasadena, California. We had everything you could think of, from Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, Bobby Sherman. We had Barry Manilow's first stuff. Nat King Cole. All that stuff. But I really gravitated towards the Beatles a lot. And then from there, one of my neighbors who used to play baseball, and we did everything in the streets together, as kids riding bikes and stuff. He got a guitar for Christmas one day, and nobody saw him for about 2 years. And he came out, and he could play like Jimmy Page. He was a child prodigy. And so I had started playing in the school band, and my principal gave me a drum set, and we just started playing. But he introduced me to Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. Also I had Leo Sayer. I just had a really eclectic. This is like when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then in high school I got into Devo and GBH and a lot of punk stuff and started playing the whole new wave scene. And then it's funny because I wasn't into metal at all until like 1980 when it, all the stuff started. We started playing. I started the same band I had played with when I was 12. We started playing on Sunset Strip and got saved.
What about you, Eddie?
So initially Kiss Destroyer. I'm 5 years old, sitting in my best friend that's 6 years old's bedroom, and his older brother had it on vinyl, and I literally picked it up and was like, oh my God. So Kiss was and still is my all-time favorite. Not because they're great musicians or any of that, just they're the most iconic band ever. Then Stripers, Yellow and Black Attack, for sure, was one that really made me want to do Christian rock and metal. And was very blessed to get to play with them twice at the Whiskey in LA, which was such a bucket list event for me. And then the Eagles live in 1982. The one that looks like it's a suitcase.
Yeah.
My dad used to play that, and just the harmonies and the musicianship. And for anybody that could sound like that live was just, I was floored. And then there are so many other stuff that I'm hugely influenced and absolutely love anything from Motown, Redding, Etta James, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
All the way up to the heaviest of stuff like Impending Doom and Whitechapel and, bands like Lorna Shore and bands like that. But if I was going to pin it down to 3, it would be those.
Which band or album got you into the Christian scene?
The Daniel Band. My first, dive into it. And then I discovered Stryper. I went and saw them a few times in California and, watched them on MTV all the time. And, it grew from there. Mainly, most of my Christian band influence was bands from Calvary Chapel and Sanctuary that we played with in Hollywood. And then, there were some other ones from the East Coast like Bride and Surrender, Crucified, Deliverance, Vengeance and Vengeance Rising. All those bands that came out of Hollywood and came out of Sanctuary. Yeah, we were fortunate that a lot of those bands were living in California and in Hollywood playing. There was no big festivals in California, but I mean, it was every week, where there'd be 4 and 5 Christian bands playing. It was a magical time.
Some of those bands have become legends. Success back then was kind of hit and miss because you had to be kind of in the same area to know about everybody.
Yeah, and Cindy, to be honest with you, with no internet, there was only Christian bookstores and local ones, and we were fortunate to go on the road a little bit because of the Pachyderm deal, and we didn't realize it until 10 years ago maybe that anyone even knew who we were until we started looking on YouTube and seeing our song going and having all these people saying these things about us. We're like, what? We never did. Wish we would have known that. We wouldn't have quit. It's just weird. And the testimonies of what our music did for people, it just drew us back in. It just was amazing.
That's wild. Chris Sorensen has joined us. While we have you here, Chris, the top 3 albums that formed your music taste.
Oh, wow. Man, that's on any given day.
Okay, so it changes.
It does. It really does. I've come from like different kinds of music. I grew up in a household, which is really funny, that was like really into country music. My mom was always listening to Patsy Cline. My stepdad was listening to Waylon Jennings and, Merle Haggard and stuff like that. And then, I started discovering rock and roll. And, it was off the map from there. But, gosh, that would be really hard to define. It would be mostly secular stuff because that's what I grew up with.
Okay.
So, might sound weird. ZZ Top, Black Sabbath, and Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Solid.
With Bad Company and just so many different things and so many different facets. I really love the old stuff like Free, which is, that was pre, Bad Company with, they had a guitar player named Paul Casa, who I thought was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I listened to a lot of Mississippi Delta blues and, all kinds of stuff. So
you got kind of that Southern rock in you.
Yes, I always have. But, obviously spending the time in Los Angeles and just listening to these just amazing guitar players and bands, there was like a lot of influence there, like Warren DeMartini, and he's from a band called Rat. There was another guy named Doug Aldridge that he just came up through the ranks. He was an amazing guitar player and a friend of mine. And, he ended up going out and playing with Dio and Whitesnake, and he's in a band called Dead Daisies now. But the guy's just a really soulful player. Real good guy too.
What was the first Christian album that turned you on to the rock and metal?
Man, this is gonna be crazy, but I'm gonna have to say Stryper. It's not really crazy. My cousin, because I had such a interest in Black Sabbath, my cousin was like a super solid Christian, and this is before I really, really just gave my heart to the Lord. Came over and saw my record collection. He's like, hey, Christian music, man, there's some really good bands. I think he went to go take me to Petra, later down the line, man. Here comes Stryper. And this is when I was living in Los Angeles. And it's just like, wow, okay, these guys are phenomenal. And it just had that really heavy thing, really good guys. And so that captured my interest.
Okay. Can you give us the backstory to you joining the band?
I think Gary had said something about being at the NAMM show. I had just gotten out of a band. We played heavy on the Sunset Strip. And it was just one of those things where this band was like really close to getting signed. You know, it's just like one of those things where it's just like, man, you really give it your all. It just doesn't quite happen. I was about to move back to Colorado, where I was from, born and raised. And walking through the NAMM show, you know, I'm just like, man, I'm just going to go and just kind of check everything out again before I leave and go back. And long story short, I ran into Michael Sweet. We'd been buddies for a while. And I walked up and we were talking and stuff. And Larry was with him, and Larry pulled me to the side and we were talking. He's just like, hey man, listen, I'm looking for a guitar player. He gave me a cassette tape. That's what we used back then. And I went back and I listened to it, and I really respected and loved Love Life, but I was looking for something a little bit heavier. You know, I just got out of this band, Showdown. We were like heavier pop type stuff, but I really just wanted aggressive. So I was listening to the stuff and really wasn't quite connecting with it. And then there was a song called There Is Love, which is on the first album. And I heard it and I'm just like, that's where I want to go. So that's what connected us. And I mean, we got together, rehearsed, and it just, man, there is a chemistry to this day. Cindy, I'm not even kidding. It is just, it is weird. Okay, so fast forward to where we are now. 5 years ago, Rox Records picked us up. They wanted to put out the first album. I hadn't talked to these guys in like 25 years, 30 years. We started getting back in contact and just like, hey man, I wonder if this takes off, if we can do a show. So we started talking about rehearsing and stuff. We went down to Oklahoma City. We had some friends facilitate a place to practice and all that. And man, after 25 years, you would think people have changed. You're not really sure you're going to jive or anything like that. These guys picked me up. Within the first 15 minutes, it felt like family again. It was just like, man, the same old jokes, all this stuff is just like, it was incredible. We got there, and man, there's still chemistry. Last weekend, I was down in Tulsa. We're recording the new album, and man, I can't even begin to tell you. Between me, Larry, and Eddie Green, it's all back. I'm so excited about the new stuff. Larry Worley's got this like incredible setup at his house. And we go in there, and man, God shows up. I'll tell you that right now. It is just incredible, like some of the stuff that comes out of there. So I'm really excited about it, but that's how the whole thing started.
Wow. Thanks for popping in, Chris. I know you got to go.
Well, thank you so much. So glad to talk to you.
You too. You have a good night.
You too.
I'm back with Eddie and Gary. I bet your creative processes had to change since back in the day. I mean, now y'all are even in different locations.
Yeah.
He's kind of the primary writer. You know, the band, he's constantly sending over, you know, new ideas, new material. I travel a lot with my work, so I tend to write a lot on the plane. I write all the lyrics for the band. I never have a shortage of them. They're constantly providing a lot of inspiration. So we'll kind of mess around with ideas and lay some things down and then send it over to the guys, and they'll do what they do to it. You know, there may be some changes, or Chris and Larry have very different writing styles, but it works really, really well for them together. You know, if I was going to say, how does Chris write? He kind of writes a lot like Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, real swampy, bluesy, you know, that kind of thing. Larry is more pocket melody kind of guy, you know, just he's a master of melody. You know, so the creative process it's lengthy because of, you know, our lives being in the way and geographical deficiencies and, you know, all of those kinds of things. Like it takes us forever to get new music out, but we're all seem to be pretty laser focused. We got a lot of stuff in the tank for this new deal, but I think we're going to really focus on just getting EPs out instead of worrying about full lengths, you know, just get single after single after single out. We spent so much time and effort trying to get Fields of Sorrow done. I think we don't need to focus on getting a full length out. We just need to get music out on a more frequent basis for the fans.
Cindy, I'll just kind of cap on the story that Eddie told about when we were in the studio and I was playing the drum part for the last part of that. We ended the night before that. I had laid most of the drum track except for that one the day before. And right before we left the studio, we were setting up for the next day, deciding what was going to happen, the decision had been made to record a remake of one of our songs. I put out a little blurb on Facebook, what would you want to hear if we were to do a remake? And I got a unanimous, and I don't know if it's unanimous because of the time or who was on there listening, whatever, but it was basically don't, do new stuff. We want to hear new music. We've had that for 30 years or 25 years. We want something new. And so we all looked at each other and it was like, what are we going to do? And so Chris likes to carry his guitar in the back seat when we're driving anywhere and just noodle. He's a noodler. And so he started playing this thing and went back to Larry's house that night. It was about a 15-minute drive. But by the time we got back to Larry's house, they had like this idea in their head. And we sat down on the couch, and I'm banging on the couch with my hands, and Larry and Chris are playing this, and it was Don't Want None. And, the song wasn't written till that day. So as Eddie's coming in, he's thinking that as Larry and Chris are sitting on the couch at midnight writing the song. And that's kind of like the whole thing is Chris and Larry get in a room together, and Eddie too. When they're all three together, like we'd be on the road and sitting in a hotel room, and boom, within 5 minutes, there's a song just pouring out of all three of them. So I always say to myself, man, what a blessing to be able to be in a band with all these guys, because it's the Holy Spirit. I think it's a God thing, and he put it together, he anoints it, and it works. I'm really proud to be in this band. I'm really blessed.
Well, I think the crazy thing is creative processes, you'll write stuff, and the way I write lyrics, I have to go in and shape them, around the music, because, if you just write them out, if you don't have a melody in mind, yeah. I'm a songwriter, but I'm not as accomplished of a writer as Larry or Chris. It is, I can write simple stuff. I'm more of a John Bon Jovi guy. It's like I'll play 3 chords and then throw the guitar behind me. But the crazy thing is we'll go in with this preconceived notion and we'll put it up on studio monitors, and all of a sudden I'm writing something completely different. It's kind of the way we are whenever we perform live. I don't ever get up on stage on the microphone and say anything contrived. I want to be led by the Holy Spirit to say whatever message that God is calling me to say to whoever needs to hear it in the audience. So it's kind of the way the music has been too. It's like I'll go in and say, okay, well, here's the idea for this song, and we'll sit down in the studio and it'll completely go a whole different direction. So I like the fact that we're open, and us having the creative freedom to be able to be who we are and not be stuck in a box.
Yeah.
Because if you've listened to all of Fields of Sorrow, it's a huge roller coaster ride. Musically, it's all over the place. You have things like American Prayer, then you have a country song that was redone, God's Country, then you have heavy stuff like Voluntary Madness and Fields of Sorrow. You have the orchestral version of Carry Me. It's everywhere. It appeals to a much broader spectrum than if we were going to be a deathcore band and every song is, blast beat, screaming, and all that. That's only going to appeal to a very niche based group of people.
Yeah, you're not boxing yourself into a particular genre.
Well, our musical tastes are so diverse that I think if we were to pigeonhole ourselves and reinvent 1993, the self-titled, I think that certain personalities would get left out, of the writing process. And that's the one thing that I'm proud about with this band is you can hear everybody's influence in that album. Everybody's got their take and their spin on it. The spotlight's not mine. It is, we're only as good as the sum of all of our parts.
Tell people what your latest release is.
2022, we released Fields of Sorrow, but on February 21st, there will be the 2025 remaster of Voluntary Madness. It's being released by our new label, Resurrection Records. We have a single already, which I'm going to go ahead and leak it, but there's going to be a single on its heels that's brand new called Weight of the World. And that will be our first release off of our new stuff that's coming out in 2025.
Off of your last album, Field of Sorrows, what's a song that you want everybody to hear?
Gary, I'll let you go first on that one.
Can I pick 2?
You can pick 2.
There's a song called Lay It All Down. I'm in love with. It's more of an anthem-y song. It's catchy. It's live. People sing and they're raising up their telephones, and it's just. There's another song on it. Believe it or not, it doesn't even have drums on it. And for me, just the message of the song, it's amazing. It's called American Prayer. And it basically is calling our country to prayer. One of the lines is, if if my people will humble themselves and pray, I'll heal their land. And that's basically the theme of the song. And Eddie will agree with me on this. The whole album did not get the exposure that it could have. And that's why we're redoing Voluntary Madness, which is a phenomenal song. We did a video for that song. And at the end of the video, we did an advertising for Celebrate Recovery. The whole song is about alcohol, the whole road that people inclined to be alcoholics ride down, and how God can cure that, and God can, change their lives. I think, it's a testimony for us too, that we need to be conscious and talk to people about it. We're a band that the show doesn't end when we play our last note. Eddie makes it very, very clear from the stage that we want to meet you. We want to talk to you. We want to look in your eyes and pray for you. We want to hug you. We want to be a part of your life if you want to be a part of our lives. We've seen healings. We've seen breakthrough. We've seen salvations. We've heard testimony of what our songs have meant to people. And that's what makes it real to us. And it's not just me, it's everybody. We're straight on that. We don't want to preach. We want to live. We want to live the life. We want to be feet on the ground.
Yeah, I really, truthfully, I still will be listening to the Fields of Sorrow album and forget that it's us. It's just such a good album, and I'm not saying that because I've vested interest in it. It's just really a good album. But I would have to say the two songs probably that are most personal for me number one would be Beautifully Broken. I love the melody. I love the structure, the way that song's laid out. We feel a lot of times as Christians, if you'll realize and look deep into the lyrics, I write from a very dark side of Christianity, and I write from the battle side of Christianity because my life was easy until I got saved. Well, I have setbacks and we're under constant attack. And, if things are easy and we're smooth sailing, we're no threat to the devil. And that some things are more beautiful broken. Look at a stained glass window. When you're broken, you're vulnerable, and it's when you need God the most. That song resonates with me. And then the other one is Riptide. I wrote that song because my wife and I nearly died in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We went out early one morning to go swim in the ocean, and nobody was on the beach, and we got caught in a riptide, and it was sucking us out. And I'm a strong swimmer. I swim about 1 mile to 1.5 miles a day, and I could not get her to shore, and I wasn't paying attention that I needed to swim with the current until I got to the beach. Even if it took me 1 mile down the beach, I would still be less labored to do it that way. I was trying to swim against it, and I literally rolled over on my back, and we looked at each other, and we really thought that was it. I mean, we were hundreds of yards offshore in a matter of seconds. We got to the beach, and we're laying there, and we can't breathe. And ironically, I went back to the beach house and wrote that song and paralleled it to life, about life being caught in the riptide, and how we feel like we're drowning, all the time. But if we will break the surface and reach above the waves, God is there to meet us right where we are and pull us out. He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. He proved that day on that beach. He's I'm not done with you yet. So that song is very personal to me, and it's just a rocking song. I mean, it's just a great song. Guys did an absolutely amazing job of taking those lyrics and breathing life into them and making it what it is.
How did the deal with Resurrection Records happen?
Yeah, we did a show with Aaron, and we were just excited about doing everything ourselves this time. And then we started looking at the charts and seeing that, his bands were climbing charts. They were getting on things we didn't even know existed. So long story short, we mentioned it to somebody we knew, and the next thing you know, Aaron was calling, and we're meeting with him and talking with him. We just felt right about it, and it worked out. And so we went for it.
And understand, Rocks Records has done great things for us, and they're still going to handle our physical releases. So Resurrection handles all the digital side of it, and all the promotions and marketing and all